I am your mother. Mom, what's happening?
Some movies shock, some disturb. And then there are those that drag you into an abyss you can never escape. Welcome to the Disturbing Movie Iceberg, where the deeper we go, the darker the films become. Brace yourself. This is not for the faint of heart. Surface level, mainstream disturbing films. Hereditary, 2018.
What? Sometimes I swear I can feel.
Hereditary is more than a horror film. It's an emotional gut punch. Ari Aster's slow burn terror seeps into your psyche, culminating in a final act so unnerving it left audiences speechless. The grief, the grotesque imagery. It's a film that haunts you long after the credits roll. From the very beginning, Aster gives us a glimpse of the dark past, hidden in the family's legacy. As we watch the characters unravel, the horror isn't just supernatural, it's personal. The haunting grief that Annie feels for her mother and the loss of her child. The creeping realization that no one is ever truly free from the past. And then there's the imagery. Grotesque, surreal. It's not just about what's in front of you, but what your mind refuses to process. As the film builds to its devastating climax, the terror is no longer just what's happening. It's the overwhelming, suffocating realization of what the characters and the audience are trapped in. The final act is pure nightmare fuel. The juxtaposition of grief and the supernatural pushes the limits of psychological horror just below the surface, disturbing but widely known. Midsommar, 2019.
We only do this every 90 years. I was most excited for you to come.
Daylight horror is rare, and Midsommar makes sure you never feel safe. Psychological breakdowns, eerie cult imagery, and shocking violence wrapped in beautiful cinematography. This is a movie that slowly dismantles your sense of security. At its core, Midsommar is about the unraveling of the human psyche. Danny, played by Florence Pugh in a truly heartbreaking performance, is already on the edge, dealing with grief and personal trauma. Her emotional breakdown is mirrored by the increasingly disturbing events around her, as she and her friends find themselves sucked into a remote Swedish commune, where customs are anything but ordinary. The horror is not in what is immediately visible, but in what lurks beneath the surface. Cultural rituals that seem innocent at first, but soon reveal themselves to be far more sinister. With each passing moment, the sense of isolation grows, the unfamiliarity with the cult's beliefs magnifying the psychological tension. The use of daylight, usually a safe haven, is turned against us, making every moment feel exposed, raw, and impossible to escape. Aster masterfully contrasts the beauty of the Swedish countryside with a slow, suffocating psychological breakdown. There's no escaping it. Every choice, every ritual, every passing second pulls you further into the darkness of this strange, terrifying world. The film's shocking violence isn't just in its brutality. It's in how it feels like an inevitable release from the tension that has been building relentlessly. Midsommar doesn't just dismantle your sense of security, it tears it apart, piece by piece. The final expression on Danny's face tells us everything. In this world, survival comes at a terrible cost. And in the blinding daylight, the horror doesn't just remain, it thrives. Mid-level, cult classics of disturbing cinema. The House That Jack Built, 2018.
When I think about all the things I've done in my life, without in any way resulting in punishment.
Lars von Trier's The House That Jack Built is a disturbing descent into the mind of a man lost to his darkest impulses. Through the eyes of Jack, portrayed by Matt Dillon in a performance that teeters between charming and monstrous. We're thrust into a grotesque world where violence, philosophy, and artistry collide. Jack is not just a killer. He's an artist, a man who sees his grisly murders as a form of self-expression, a way to create masterpieces in the most perverse sense. Von Trier invites us to walk with Jack through his murders, each one designed not just for brutality, but for philosophical exploration. Through this journey, we're forced to confront our own capacity for darkness, an exploration of evil that is as intellectual as it is violent. As the narrative unfolds, Von Trier's direction brings us closer and closer to Jack's mind, where reality and delusion intertwine. His work isn't simply about control. It's about the pursuit of perfection, about the philosophy of death and destruction as art. But as each crime escalates, so does his descent. And as the viewer, we're left questioning, what compels us to watch? What does it say about us? The film isn't just unrelenting in its depiction of Jack's violence. It's unflinchingly philosophical. The tension grows not just from the visceral horror of what he does, but from the strange detachment of it all. Jack talks about his crimes as if they are part of a grand design. He speaks to a shadowy voice, perhaps a representation of his own justification, or a representation of hell itself, each word pushing him further toward his inevitable fate. The house that Jack built isn't for the faint of heart. It's a brutal, unyielding examination of a man so consumed by his own psyche that he believes every act of violence is justified by the pursuit of art. Viewer discretion is not just recommended, it's absolutely necessary. Von Trier's unflinching gaze at the darkest corners of the human mind doesn't offer redemption, only an endless spiral into chaos. Deep below, lesser-known psychological nightmares. Titane, 2021. Titane is an assault on the senses. Winner of the Palme d'Or, it takes everything you thought you knew about body horror and psychological distress and pushes it into uncharted, deeply uncomfortable territory. It is a film that doesn't ask for your sympathy. It demands your attention, whether you're ready for it or not. Alexia, a woman whose body becomes both a weapon and a prison, is at the heart of this unflinching film. From the opening moments, we're plunged into a world where the human body is not just flesh. It's an object, a vessel, a machine that can be twisted and used. Alexia's journey is one of transformation, both physical and psychological, but in ways that are far more disturbing than anything Cronenberg's films have dared to explore. The film's emotional core is buried beneath layers of grotesque violence and disturbing body transformation. As Alexia's journey spirals, we are thrust into an exploration of family, of connection. But these connections are not easy, nor are they normal. The relationship between Alexia and Vincent, a fire chief who believes her to be his long-lost son, is one of the most unsettling aspects of Titane. It's not just about love or loss. It's about the need for human connection, distorted and made grotesque by a world that refuses to let people exist without discomfort. Violence in Titane is not something that happens to characters. It's something they actively embrace, or even become. Alexia's actions are shocking, but they're not arbitrary. The violence, like everything else in the film, is part of a greater transformation, a brutal exploration of identity, survival, and the boundaries of the human form. At its core, Titane is about the human body, its limits, its decay, and its ability to transform. But it is also about identity, about how we are shaped not only by our experiences, but by our deepest desires and fears. The film challenges what it means to be human, to be alive, to belong. And just when you think you can predict where it's going, it dives deeper, further into bizarre territory, leaving you disoriented and disturbed. Titan is not for the faint of heart. It's a brutal, nightmarish experience that leaves you questioning not just what you've seen, but what it means to be human. If you thought Cronenberg's films were unsettling, this takes it a step further, pushing the boundaries of horror and body trauma into a space that is as profoundly disturbing as it is bizarre. The Abyss, the most unsettling films of all time. Skinamarink, 2022.
In this house.
Skinamarink is a film like no other. It doesn't rely on gore or typical horror tropes. It takes a far more insidious approach. It plays on the very fabric of reality itself, pulling you into a nightmarish world where time and space become warped, and the simplest moments are filled with existential dread. The horror in Skinamarink is not what you can see. It's what's missing. The film is a slow burn of isolation, punctuated by the unsettling sense that something is wrong, but you can't quite place it. Long, lingering shots of nothingness, empty rooms, half-seen figures, create a world that feels both familiar and profoundly alien. The house itself becomes a maze, its walls closing in on you with each passing minute. The voices, too, are distorted, garbled, disconnected, and far too distant to bring comfort. The children's cries and whispers seem to come from all directions, adding to the overwhelming sense of being trapped in a place where nothing is certain. The boundaries between the living and the non-living blur as the film stretches your perception of what's real and what's imagined. Every sound, every flicker of light, every moment of stillness leaves you on edge, unsure of what's to come. The film doesn't offer answers. There are no neat resolutions, just a growing sense of dread that escalates, but never fully reveals itself. The unknown is its weapon, and the result is an experience that leaves you questioning your own grip on reality. Much like the children at the center of the film, you're left adrift in a world that feels detached from the rules of time and logic. Skinamarink asks the most unsettling question of all. What happens when you find yourself alone, lost, and cut off from everything you thought was real? The film is an exploration of childhood fear, isolation, and the gradual collapse of reality itself. The creeping dread in Skinamarink is felt in every shot, every lingering moment of darkness. It's the kind of fear that doesn't need a monster or a villain. It's the fear of being alone, of being trapped in a reality that feels wrong, but you can't escape. It's a primal fear, deeply unsettling in its simplicity, and it stays with you long after the film ends. Skinamarink doesn't give you a clear answer. It leaves you with an empty void, one that is far more terrifying than any monster could be. This is a film that doesn't just disturb. It forces you to confront the limits of your own understanding, leaving you questioning what's real and what isn't. A nightmare that exists beyond the screen, one that continues to haunt your mind long after the credits roll. The Bottom of the Iceberg, films that push the limit of sanity. Speak No Evil, 2022.
Give again, you.
No. It truly breaks my heart to hear that you haven't enjoyed your stay.
Speak No Evil is not a conventional horror film. There are no jump scares, no supernatural forces, just pure psychological torment. It's a film that preys on social norms, on the terrifying consequences of politeness, and the quiet horrors that come from ignoring your instincts. The horror here isn't immediate. It's a slow, suffocating build. The tension seeps in like a poison, barely noticeable at first, disguised as discomfort, as minor social awkwardness. But the longer you watch, the more you realize something is deeply, deeply wrong. As the story unfolds, the sense of dread becomes unbearable. The Danish family at the heart of the film is polite, accommodating, too accommodating. Even when their instincts scream at them to leave, they stay. Why? Because confrontation is uncomfortable, because saying no feels rude, because humans are conditioned to endure discomfort rather than cause conflict. And then the horror arrives. Not suddenly, not with a bang, but with an inevitability that makes it even worse. The final act of Speak No Evil is among the most harrowing sequences in modern horror. Not because of what happens, though it is unspeakably brutal, but because by the time it arrives, you knew it was coming. And yet, you couldn't stop it. Just like the characters, you are trapped. This is not just a film. It's a psychological experiment in endurance. It forces you to confront your own inaction, your own fears of breaking social etiquette, even when your life is at stake. It leaves you shaken, helpless, and questioning just how far you would let things go before finally saying, enough. Speak No Evil doesn't end when the credits roll. It lingers in your mind, in your body, in that deep, dark part of your gut that tells you, this wasn't just a movie, this was a warning, and you ignored it. As we ascend from the depths of this list, one thing becomes clear. True horror isn't just about blood and jump scares. It's about the things that stick with you. What's the most disturbing movie you have ever seen? Let us know in the comments, if you dare.